we go. All right, hi everybody. We're gonna let you start jumping on as soon as I find my, there it is. Here we come. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday. It's beautiful here in Colorado. I am actually on campus this month. It's lovely. The weather's beautiful, blue skies, lots of elk and trees. I hope everybody's enjoying their day. We got a great presentation for you. We'll give it about 30 more seconds. All right, I'm impatient. We're going to get going because Kevin's got a huge presentation for us, and I'm so excited. Welcome everybody to the 2023 Professional Webinar Series. My name is Christy Weeks, and I am the Brand and Digital Media Manager for the Harmony Foundation. Let's see, we're going to run through a handful of things. So today's presentation is working with families that are struggling with addiction and codependency. And it's presented by Kevin Petersen with the Chronic Hope Institute. I'm so excited to have him on. I've tracked him down at several conferences and finally got a hold of him. So we're in for a treat. For those of you who are new to the webinar, a little about Harmony. We are located on 43 acres just outside Estes Park, Colorado, at the foot of the Rocky Mountain National Park. We are 54 years and counting of treating addiction and the families of our clients. And we are absolutely abstinence-based. Little bit about the programming here. We are about 70 beds for our residential program. We do have a full medical detox. We offer a virtual IOP program, and we have a family support education program as well, because we know how important the family is to this piece of the puzzle. We also have a very, very strong alumni support service department that continues to grow, and we try to keep our clients as engaged as they possibly can be when they leave us. So this picture is Swickard. It's one of my favorites. I always like to share it. It is our female identified program. We do individualized gender-specific treatment. We are evidence-based and a 12-step program. We provide a lifetime of support for our alumni and our family members for free. We provide resources for them, programming, events, places where they can reconnect, and ask questions. So if you're interested in learning more about Harmony, please visit our website at harmonyfoundationinc.com, or you can give us a call and talk to one of our admissions specialists. We're happy to answer questions and give you more information. That number is on the screen at 970-586-4491. So things to know about today. This webinar is being recorded and will be accessible on our website by end of day on Friday. We offer a CEU certificate for this, which will also be available and emailed to you by the end of day on Friday. You must be involved in the program for at least 45 minutes. I do track it. We do stick to that. And if you have any questions or you need to jump off early, I can give you a certificate of attendance if need be. It just will not be a CEU. Please check your junk folders. My emails go to your junk folders on the regular. So if you have any questions, give me a shout. Last thing, we do have a survey that will pop up. If you happen to miss it at the end of the program, that's okay. I will be sending a link to it with the CE certificate if you'd like to give your feedback. We do not require it to receive the CEU, but we do really appreciate your feedback because we'd like to continue to provide you with speakers and presentations that are relevant to you in your practice. So today's presenter, Kevin Petersen with the Chronic Hope Institute. He is, I'm going to give us a rundown here. He is the founder of the Chronic Hope Institute, which provides family addiction coaching for families in crisis due to addiction and codependency. 2011, Kevin graduated with a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Regis University, and he spent 3.5 years working with the Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health Network as an in-home therapist, case manager, crisis evaluator, and outpatient therapist for child and family services. Kevin has also worked part-time for the Bridge House, ADMHN's acute treatment unit, as a mental health tech and a counselor. 2014, Kevin opened his private practice, Petersen Family Counseling, which specializes in working with families and individuals struggling with addictions, codependency, and parenting. Kevin has published 2 books. Highly suggest you look for them, acquire them: Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child, and Chronic Hope, Families and Addiction, which share an integrated, holistic approach to healing families in crisis due to addiction and codependency. Kevin established the Chronic Hope Institute in 2020 with a mission to help families in crisis through family addiction coaching. Dedicated to strengthening the family system, Kevin turns helplessness into hope. It's probably one of my favorite bios ever. If you have any questions and want to learn more about the Chronic Hope Institute, please visit his website. The link is on the screen, chronichope.us. Take a look, and with all that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin because I know he's got a lot in store for you.
Oh man, thanks a lot. That guy sounds really impressive on paper.
Doesn't he? I kind of like that guy.
Seems like I got a lot to live up to there. The other thing, by the way, that I thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm so excited. This is going to be so much fun. And I think one of the things we talked about is if people want to ask questions, go ahead, right, and put them in the chat.
Yes, please enter them in the chat box. I'll be watching for them and help Kevin along the way so he can stay focused.
I reserve the right to say we're going to get to that later, because when I've done this before, a lot of times the questions that come in are something we're going to get to. So, but I'm free. I'm going to go as quickly as I can, but try to cover all the material. By the way, one of the things I would tell you is also go to my Instagram channel, which is at Kevin W. Petersen, S-E-N, Petersen with an E. And I produce and publish tons and tons of stuff that you're going to see today and stuff like this.
Okay.
And, so anyway, that's all right. And now, okay, so I got to put my stuff up here. Huh?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I just opened the chat box, everybody, just so you know. I realized it was closed. Love to hear where you're from. And I'm tuning out, Kevin. This is all yours.
Okay. All right. Let's see how it goes. Away we go.
Away we go.
Hi, guys. Nice to see everybody. Here's the title of our talk. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history on me. And I think it's important so you understand where I'm coming from and what my perspective is. And so I grew up in a little town. Well, I grew up in a town called Palo Alto, California. I was born and raised there. Back when it was just cute little college town and not the weird space that it is today. I ended up going to the University of Southern California in 1982. And that is correct. I didn't graduate until 1994 because I flunked out due to drugs and alcohol, and then was given a second chance when I got sober in 1991 and went back and finished school. I graduated from Regis, like Christy said, and I have a master's in marriage and family. And I also stayed to get a certificate in child and adolescent counseling, which taught me that I love kids, but I have no interest in working with kids. That's not my jam. My jam is looking at the parents and the family system and identifying what's going on, because I think that's how you impact change. Like she said, professionally, I worked when I was in grad school. I worked at a place called Reflections for Youth up in Loveland. And then I worked in child and family. Well, I worked for Rappo Douglas, and then we already went all this. I've been sober since May of 1991, started going to Al-Anon in December of 2009. And then I started doing adult children of alcoholics in 2017. I grew up in a house of addiction. This is important for you to understand from my perspective. My mom was a prescription drug addict. My house was filled with, a lot of chaos, crisis, drama, unpredictability, instability. On the outside, it looked wonderful. My dad was very successful. He worked very hard. We had a beautiful home and lots of the accoutrements that come from that. But on the inside, it was every man for himself. And it was a very, very strange environment. And then I started using drugs and alcohol when I was, 13 or so. And the Boy Scouts of America actually is kind of where I first kicked off. And I just took to it like a fish to water. I faked my graduation from college in 1988. And that was, my parents wanted to know when I was going to graduate. It had been 6 years. of them paying for college. And I was like, I don't know, let me see. And I turned in the paperwork, and what I got back was a handwritten letter saying, you got to be kidding. You're not even registered at this university. This is ridiculous. And you're on academic probation. Dean of Student Life has been looking for you. And, you couldn't, and you owe us 20 grand. So you couldn't register for a class if you wanted to. Got sober, graduated from USC, graduated from Regis. Okay, let's get into the good stuff here. This is the meat and potatoes. What we're talking about is how to engage with a family that's struggling with drugs and alcohol and the addiction in their system. So these are the things that I want you to look for when you're dealing with these families. Recognize the signs of an unmanageable lifestyle, right? It's it's trouble with the school, trouble with the law, trouble with the family, trouble at work. And changes and then help the family identify that if the individual we're talking about, look for changes in moods, depression, anxiety, apathy, struggling with day-to-day existence, change in overall demeanor, personal hygiene, other things to look for with teaching. And we're teaching the family. I know you guys know this, but we're teaching the family. Look for the changes in social circles, friends, dating patterns, sports, hobbies, jobs, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the telltale signs of someone who's getting out of control. Qualify your family. Does the family appear to ask these questions or observe this when you talk to them? Do they place blame on themselves or others for the addict's substance abuse? Every family I work with will tell you at some point they'll say, this is our fault because of fill in the blank. Or it's because of that girlfriend or that boyfriend or those people or that school or this or that. It's always an outside source that's responsible. And now we're identifying family pattern behaviors and systems of always projecting the blame goes elsewhere and not taking accountability. Is the family defensive? Do they show typical signs of denial? Like, oh no, my favorite question to ask every family I work with is, hey, what's the history of addiction, alcoholism, and mental health issues in your family system? And they're like, oh no, there's none. It's just him. He's the only one in the entire history genealogy of our entire family. And I don't argue with that anymore. I used to really get into it with them, like, that's insane. And now I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And honestly, within 5 minutes, they've already crossed themselves and started telling me about other behavior patterns that I can help them identify as addiction, alcoholism, mental health issues. Is it apparent that they set poor boundaries? These are the things you want to be looking for. One of my favorite ones is, do you have reservations or think they're going to pull out of this nosedive themselves? One of the things that every family I work with will tell me almost immediately is, we think if he just gets the right medication, the right therapist, the right girlfriend, the right friend, the right job, everything's going to be okay. And it's this magical thinking of that if we can just get that one piece of the puzzle to fit, everything's going to go and it's going to be great. And so what I want to do is hear them out, get all the cards on the table, and get them to the point where you're like, okay, are you ready for a different methodology? Are you ready to try something different? There's no therapist that can get somebody sober. That's not how therapy works. And let's be clear, when we talk about sober is about quitting drugs and alcohol and living a new way of life, not just quitting drugs and alcohol. And then the whole family has to be ready to make some change as well. All right, getting buy-in from our family. What I like to do is educate them, and this evaluates them on where we are and what's going on. There are generally what I think are 3 types of users or extra alcoholics. The first one is what we call a social user. They can take it or leave it. They have one drink, get a little high, stop, moderate, no big deal. Occasionally they might have a blowout once in a while. Then they're like, oh my God, what am I doing? And they got to pull that and they got to rein that stuff in. By the way, in my family system, that was my sister. Okay. She could occasionally have a drink, occasionally go out and party and have some fun, but she would rein it back in and keep everything under control. One of her famous phrases, when I start to feel goofy is when I stop. I'm like, what are you nuts? That's when it gets fun. Then we have the hard user. And hard users, when given a sufficient reason at home or at work or by the legal system, they can stop or moderate. They have the ability to control this process. Sometimes they just let it go out of control for a long time, but they can actually pull it back in. They'll hear things like, if this happens again, you're going to get fired. If it happens again, we're getting a divorce. If it happens again, you're going to go to jail. And then they're like, oh, nope, I'm going to pull that back. The addict and the alcoholic cannot regulate or stop no matter what the consequences are. And the really fascinating thing is the addict and the alcoholic has no idea why. And it's not because they're doing it on purpose. They're not out to get you. They're not out to, screw up your life. They really have no idea what's going on. Again, there's three parts of addiction. The physical, and the physical is what we call the phenomenon of craving. It's once they start, they cannot stop or control it. And that was always the thing. I always knew within myself when I was using, is that I knew once I started drinking, I was off. That was all there was. I had to not drink at all, but I couldn't get to that space. I couldn't keep that promise to myself. They don't have a filter. It's the first drink that starts the addiction, not the last. One of the, like it says there, when you get hit by a train, it's not the caboose that kills you, right? It's the engine. It's the first drink that's the problem. That's the physical. The mental is the lie that the alcoholic and the addict tells themselves. This time it's going to be different. The problem isn't the alcohol and the drugs. It's all the other people around me. It's all the circumstances around me. It's all the things out here that are causing this problem. It's not me. And then the final part of addiction is what we call the spiritual malady. And that is the addict is not willing to accept or admit defeat. And they're not willing to accept help. I'm going to figure this out. I don't need any help. I've got this. While their house is on fire, they're getting divorced, they've been fired from their job, and they have no money. I still have a plan. I'm going to still figure this out. And that's because they don't want to try something that's going to be, they know is going to be uncomfortable. Common objections from the family that you're going to see. We don't think he has a substance abuse problem. We think it's a mental health problem. Hear this all the time, especially from, upper middle class, upper class families. They're like, oh, he doesn't have a drug problem. He just does that because he's depressed or anxious or because of the divorce or whatever. And so my response is always to that is, well, okay, but in order for us to get to the mental health issue, we're gonna have to eliminate the substance abuse, because nobody can evaluate somebody when they're actively using or drinking. Can we agree on that? And they generally are like, oh, okay, that sounds good. I don't think he wants to go to treatment. No, let me be clear. Nobody wants to go to treatment. What we're really going to do is start, talking about what's more important. Whether or not them living longer is more important than whether or not we're going to hurt their feelings. We tried setting boundaries, and he doesn't care. They don't work, and we're going to get into that in the next couple of slides. I'm going to show you how to set boundaries appropriately. People only get sober when they want to, Kevin. I don't buy that. I really don't. I think that people get sober when their situation and their circumstances around them force them into that environment. And that's what my family did to me. When I was 26, my parents circled the wagon and looked at me and said, we love you, but we're done. And we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to participate in your suicide. So I think that's something you got to be careful of. Oh, they're just being a teenager. He's a functional alcoholic. I'm sure you guys have heard all this. It was an accidental overdose. I'm going to be clear with you. My friends that were sober or clean from hard drugs will tell you every one of them knew the consequences, the potential that I could die. It's just pot. Well, Colorado will prove to you that's nonsense. She'll be mad and run away. Oh my God, what do we do? And we're going to talk about that. So how does the family get started? Here's the meat and potatoes. Here's the good stuff. We're going to set boundaries, accountability, and structure in 3 categories. So the first thing this is what I call Plan A. And this is in my books, it's in my videos, and that's if you want more of this stuff, and that's where I would say also definitely subscribe to my social media channels, because I talk about this stuff repetitively. Boundaries. It's drawing a hard line, around behaviors. And these are your lines of parameters to set for what you will and will not tolerate. And the other thing that I need to put underneath there is boundaries are not about the other person. Boundaries are about you and what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to do or not to do. Accountability. Well, boundaries are worthless if they don't have some sort of function of accountability behind them, because I get this all the time. Oh, we tried setting boundaries, but he just did whatever he wanted. I was like, oh, okay, and then what did you do? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, that's what we're going to talk about. This is your measure for activating the boundary, and we're going to get into what that looks like in specifics in just a second. And then structure is, that's what's going to happen if the boundary is met or not met. It's about you having consistent consequences and rewards when a boundary measure, an accountability measure, is met or not met, and that's what we're going to get into. So I believe in setting boundaries in 3 categories, and just 3 simple, easy categories. It's just, I try to make it super relaxed, straightforward, and basic, so families don't get too overwhelmed and caught up. The first one is drugs and alcohol, and the boundary is no drugs and no alcohol. And we want to see if they can actually do it. Maybe they can pull out of the nosedive, who knows, but we're going to give them a chance. And then the accountability behind that is we're going to do regular drug testing and or use of a breathalyzer each day. And there's plenty of commercial versions you can buy on Amazon. There's Sober Links. There's lots of different companies out there that you can work with. But one of the things that I'm very insistent upon is when we do drug testing, we're not going to do drug testing in the sense of you're going to do it at home. We're going to send them to a drug testing facility for 2 reasons. 1, they're much more difficult to beat. And 2, they are going to give us, the home tests are just going to give you a positive, negative response. The tests at a facility are going to give you positive, negative, and an amount, and that amount is going to tell us how much and how often. And that's critical for us to know. So the structure, it's the consequences and rewards, is if the tests are clean, then all the privileges are restored. If it's someone who's under your control, like they're under 18, or they're in college, or they're living in your, it's a child that's living in your house, you have the ability to say, internet, phone, car, social life, etc., finances. You have the ability to say, hey, look, until you achieve this, the answer is going to be no. And we love you, but the answer is no. And that's the hard part, is coaching the family into that position. Next one is work or school. My position is, if somebody's sober, there's no reason they shouldn't be getting a 3.0 GPA or better. I was a perfect example of that. When I got sober, I was a straight A student. When I wasn't sober, I literally was an F student. When I went back to school in 1991, I had a 1.1 GPA. And I was a disaster. So 3.0 GPA, no missing assignments, and they have to attend all their classes. Simple, straightforward. Now, if they're not in school, which is okay, then what we're going to do is expect them to work full time. Or if they're doing a combination of part-time school, part-time work. But what we're trying to do is give them, this is your job. Your job is to go to school, or your job is to work, or your job is a combination of the two. And we're going to expect a level of self-reliance and accountability from both of those things. The accountability is that we're going to get a weekly report from the school. And most places today have a portal that you can check in on, and just, we're only going to do it once a week. We're not going to hover over them 24/7. I want the family out of the addict management business. Okay. What we're going to end up doing is having I always tell them, on Friday afternoon or Friday evening, we're going to have a family meeting. We're going to check the drug tests, and we're going to check the school portal, or we're going to check their contribution to the budget based upon the fact that, if they're working, they have money, and you can say, we expect a certain percentage of that for living here, rent, food, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to start paying your own way, and then the last piece, right, is if the 3.0 and the no missing assignments and privileges, and they're attending their classes, great. Same with the money and work. As long as you're participating and helping us out and becoming part of the the team, we're going to work with you. Last one, which I actually would tell you, I think is almost more important than the other two, is behavior at home. And, you know, what we're talking, this is what I always tell the family is pick your top 5 things. I see people with these 5-page contracts. I'm like, no, no 5-page contracts. Let's just make it super simple. You know, like no disrespectful behavior, no hitting, no language, no violence. Chores are to be completed on time. Dishes are put away. You know, maybe it's, you know, we're going to have dinner together every night. No hiding in your room. You know, simple, straightforward stuff. You know, accountability is we're going to have that weekly meeting or family therapy or work with one of my team and do a family addiction coaching where this is all reviewed. And by the way, this is also an opportunity for the addict to speak up for themselves and say, hey, I'm here, I'm trying, but let's be clear, you guys aren't. And this, so that's got to be good for both. Structure, if the goals are achieved, then privileges are restored. If they're not, then no privileges. Very direct and very straightforward. If the family member, you know, is abusing alcohol and marijuana, I like to give them a 30-day window to clean up their act. You know, we're going to test them weekly and offer support if they're struggling. And by that, I mean, if they're like, look, I really want to do this. I really want it. But I don't know if I can do it by myself. Great. Let's look for a therapist. Let's look for a doctor or a psychiatrist. Let's look for, you know, maybe they want to go to some 12-step meetings. Okay, great. Let me help you find those. You know, the other thing is there are lots of people out there now that do recovery coaching, and it's like, hey, why don't you know, if we can afford it, let's get you a recovery coach. You know, this is not meant to be a punitive system. This is not meant to punish people into sobriety. This is meant to tell them, I love you, but I'm not okay with the way things are going. And until they change, I'm going to set up some pretty strict boundaries. Now, if you want to change and you're having trouble and you want help, I'm happy to help you and point you in the right direction. But if your position is, I don't need your help, I don't want to do this, then it's like, okay, cool. Then we're just going to, you know, good luck with that. I will respect your decision. If they're using hard drugs like cocaine, meth, opiates, benzos, you know, fentanyl, I always say, you know, have a meeting with them, tell them what the rules are, do a drug test with them, and then make it clear that if something doesn't happen immediately, there's going to be some quick changes right away. And we're going to talk about what I call Plan B in just a second, because we don't want them to die. And that's become an epidemic, obviously, as we all know. One of the things, too, is that most of the families that I work with want to spend a lot of time explaining things to the addict, rationalizing, reasoning with them. Just don't. That time is over with. What I always tell people is when you're arguing with an addict, who do you think's winning the argument? You know, it just doesn't work that way. Another thing I hear all the time is if I do what you're suggesting, they'll get mad at me and they'll threaten to get high and kill themselves. Okay, so that if that's where we're at, right? 2 things. One, we have to agree that the behavior that they're doing is already life-threatening and we need to do something, right? Okay. And number 2, that's a sign that this is a problem. We can't allow them to hold you hostage. Let's find a way out. Let's say, well, you know, if that's how you feel, and by the way, if you're threatening to kill yourself, I'm going to call 911. And you know, let's get some help. Don't be shaming. Don't be angry. Don't be putative. This is the statement my dad told me in a 4-hour car ride in August of 1990. You're my son and I love you, but I'm not willing to participate in your suicide. And until you're willing to make some changes, you're no longer welcome in the family. And you know, we love you, but this is not okay. And we will respect your choices. If your choice is to continue to live like this, then our choice is going to be to put up a wall. And you let us know if you want to change. So what if, I hope this isn't blocking everybody. What if the loved one won't quit? Well, there is a plan B. Plan B is intervention and treatment. Now, most families don't know a lot about treatment. They don't really know what's going on, and they're not quite sure what to do with any of this stuff. So they're kind of a little lost. So I put this graphic together where I sit them down. I say, well, let's take a look at the spectrum, because I want to set the expectation that treatment isn't just a 30-day, you know, miracle. What we're going to do is probably going to have to do some medical detox. Then we're going to do a residential treatment center like Harmony. And then we're going to probably look at a PHP program like Harmony, an intensive outpatient program like Harmony, and sober living. And to be totally blunt with you, in a perfect world, I would love to see someone who's struggling with drugs and alcohol engaged in at least 12 months of programming. And I know that sounds scary and overwhelming, but the statistics show that people that just do a 30-day program, they don't stay sober. It doesn't work. So, the idea is to prepare the family ahead of time for this is what we're looking at. Obviously, we're going to need an interventionist. And I always tell the families, please don't try to do this yourself. It's not going to work. I'm shocked we haven't. Normally I get questions at this point. So that's okay. We'll just keep cruising. I always tell them, hey, ask for a word of mouth referral from a professional in the recovery community, or a therapist or a doctor or someone that is engaged with this, an addiction therapist, a recovery coach, psychiatrist. Understand that you get what you pay for. The average fee for a skilled interventionist is about $5,000 when you consider the actual preparation for the intervention, and then the follow-up and the transportation. Make sure the interventionist is insured, trained, and certified. And all those things are available on the different websites. NATAP is one of the best ones. Ask for your interventionist plan of action. This plan should include detailed travel arrangements. You want to know how it's going to go, what's going to happen. And then I always try to get some, if you have time, if we're not in a deep crisis, I always say, let's get some references and let's talk to some other families and how it's gone, and have them share their experiences of what worked and what didn't work. And then, keep in mind that the best interventionists that I work with work in teams of 2. Choosing a treatment facility. Okay, this is critical because most families are completely lost in this process and they have no idea what they're doing. The first thing the question is always cash or insurance. Do you have a question?
There is a question, and I wanted to catch it before you went too far here. You mentioned family dynamics and history of substance abuse. Many of our clients live within that dynamic and are trying to get sober in that living space. What do you recommend with situations where the family nucleus is dealing with substance abuse or mental health issues?
Well, now we're focusing on the individual. And I definitely have an answer for you, but I want to be super clear with this is a great question, by the way, that my perspective is that I work with the families. I don't work with the individuals. So as far as an individual that's struggling within the family structure and is like, what do I do? Well, I mean, honestly, the best thing I can tell you is get out. You're going to have to leave. If you're serious about getting sober and the people around you are not, then you're going to have to put your sobriety first and you're going to have to disengage. That's really the only answer I have for you, and ideally, it was a great question. I mean, I can go all day on the family system. Who asked that question? I have to know who it was.
Let's see. I'm rolling Miguel Avina.
Miguel, great question. One of the things I would tell you that client or tell you to tell your client is, you have to commit to taking care of yourself, and that may be separating yourself from your family because it could kill you. One of the things that when I got sober, my mom never got sober. My mom died in 2014 of long-term prescription drug use. And one of the things I had to do with my family was limit my time and exposure to them. And, they weren't like, walking around with, joints and beers and needles. It wasn't anything like that. But the behavior was just too much for me, overwhelming for me. So I would just be like, well, I'll come up, I'll spend a little time with you, and then I got to go, and that's about protecting me and about protecting me. Getting sober is very much about learning how to take care of yourself. And sometimes that means you have to set the boundaries back to your family,
Right.
So
it becomes your responsibility to draw those lines.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Miguel, I hope I answered your question. If not, please email me or message me and we can have a much more broad conversation about that because that's a great topic.
So two more quick ones that should be relatively short. How often do you recommend recovery coaches?
It obviously depends on the family's finances. I'm a big fan of the concept. If we have someone that is, at the family, sits somebody down and says, hey, this is what we want to do, and we're happy to give you some assistance, and the person says yes, then I always have it available.
Perfect. And then what, if you'll be willing to share the recommended resource for certification as an interventionist?
Well, that's okay. Again, I don't do that.
Right.
What I know, there's lots of different programs out there. I know that there's Judith Landau's program in Boulder, and I always get the name wrong. I call it Aspire, but it's not Aspire. It's something else. You know, it's help me.
I'm actually, now you put me on the spot and I can't remember. And it's such an amazing program. And I'll get back to you. I'll put it in the thing. Arise.
Arise is great. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because she's amazing.
Yeah, and their program is amazing. I know there's like a certified interventionist program training. But you know what it really comes down to is, if you're going to recommend the interventionist, you need to be comfortable with them. You need to interview them. You need to work with them. I'm going to tell you, I work with great interventionists. You know how I learned that? Working with not so great interventionists. And one of the things I would be really cautious with in that environment is watch out for the people that are 2 or 3 years sober that are like, I'm going to be an interventionist. And I went to a weekend seminar. And the other pet peeve that I have is they also think they're capable of being family case managers. And I actually kind of got into it with someone a couple of years ago who was like, you and I are basically the same. And I'm like, whoa. I have a master's degree from an accredited university. Right. I went for 3 years. I have 2,000 hours. I'm screened by the FBI. You went to a weekend seminar. We are not the same,
Right.
Let's be clear. Yeah. And a lot of the interventionists and recovery coaches that I work, we have a very straightforward arrangement. I'm the family guy. They're the individual guy. And so perfect. Great questions though. Wow, great questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Onward.
All right, I'm going to do the best I can. All right, choosing a treatment facility. We're going to kind of whip through this because I want to get to the family stuff. First question's always got to be cash or insurance. You got to find out what they can afford. You don't want to be trying to sell them a place that's way out of their ballpark. So don't be, and it's okay. Don't be afraid. There's plenty of great 30-day treatment programs that take insurance. It's just about the follow-up afterwards, Any special considerations, LGBTQ plus, affirming, male, female, severe trauma, coexisting disorders. There's lots of different of stuff out there. There's lots of availability. In-state or out-of-state. I'm a big fan of out-of-state. Let's get them out of the environment. I don't want one of their friends rolling over and picking them up and taking them home. After 30 days, we definitely want to engage in a PHP program, an IOP program, and statistics show us that 70 to 80% of addicts who only do a 30-day program and nothing else end up relapsing. So let's look at a 6-month and a 12-month program. Consider 90-day programs. All right, now let's talk about the family. How do we heal that family? While that person's in treatment, this is our chance to dig in with the family. One of the things I really like to do is assess the family dynamics. And by that, I mean, we're going to have a weekly meeting to discuss feelings and ask questions, because that person is going to treatment and they're going to start talking a new language, and they're going to start changing their behavior, and they're going to start doing things differently. And the family's going to be like, well, we wanted him to quit drinking and doing drugs, but we really weren't ready for him to start behaving differently. We just want the old person back. So we got to start addressing that and assessing that. This is one of my favorite little acronyms: consistency. Create success through repetition to conquer for the addict and the alcoholic, it's regular meetings regularly. I go to the same meetings every week and see the same people, because that creates accountability. And you develop a sense of connection and community to help heal and keep the egos in check. Transparency, no family secrets. Everything has to be on the table. Now, obviously, I was just talking about the addict and the alcoholic. Guess what? The exact same thing works for the family. We got to have that same consistency. People are going to therapy. People are doing the homework. I'm big on homework. Families that work with me do the homework, or we don't meet again. I believe in any kind of support meeting. I don't care if it's faith-based, not faith-based, 12-step, not 12-step. I don't care. If you're going, great. Here's my only condition. If you're going to this thing and all they're doing is bitching and complaining and talking about how to control the other person, that's not supportive. I want something that's actually helping you get through the day. Books I'm a big fan of are Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, Unspoken Legacy by Claudia Black, which is phenomenal. Facing Codependence by Pia Melody, and the Chronic Hope books by me. I think they do a great job of helping families understand. Big fan of the video Pleasure Unwoven, the documentary by Kevin McCauley. It's fantastic. And I'm also a big fan of having the family continue to work with a family addiction coach. 2 things to remember on the family. You're not responsible for your loved one's addiction, but you are responsible for how you react to it. Recovery requires a continuum of care, from detox to outpatient treatment to post-treatment support. It's critical that the family understand that they are not responsible for this, and that a 30-day vacation is not going to solve the problem. Let's talk about codependency. And I know codependency, there's like this, oh, we don't like that word. Okay, cool. When I think codependency, here's what I think: family of origin trauma. Because that's where it comes from. That is the root of codependency, is growing up in an environment where as a child, you had to learn maladaptive systems to a chaotic, insane lifestyle. Things to look for when you're dealing with codependent families. Obviously, low self-esteem, poor boundaries. I mean, you guys know all this. This is pretty straightforward stuff. Let's dig in a little bit. Codependency. So this is my favorite statement about what is codependency. It's driven by the agreement that I will work harder on your problem and your life than you will. That is a big, big piece of being codependent. And then the back end of that is I will get angry with you for not listening to me or taking more initiative and not following my directions. Then there's always a piece of, after all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. I told you this was going to happen. You never listen. How come you don't follow our directions? Those are very codependent features. Enabling is rescuing someone who continues to make poor decisions. One of the things that I established with my families really quickly is, look, I want you to understand something. They're never going to change their behavior if they don't feel the consequences of their actions. What's their incentive? Why should they? Every time they get into trouble or they get into a financial situation and you swoop in and rescue them, it teaches them, oh, I don't have to deal with this. Somebody else is going to solve my problem. Someone else is going to call my boss and cover for me. Somebody else is going to tell a lie. And again, that's the family system that has to change. Everyone thinks it's about changing the individual. And I will tell you that over the 32 years that I've been sober and the time that I've been doing this work, the most successful way to change an individual is to change the family system. You want to get somebody sober, start getting into your own recovery. That will force the bar higher and they'll have to come with you. People pleasing is, I just did a talk on people pleasing on Monday. That's going to come out in July. Codependents usually don't think they have a choice. They feel responsible for everyone else's happiness and well-being. Saying no causes them huge anxiety. And they go out of their way and sacrifice their own needs to accommodate other people because they were taught to do that as children. And they were rewarded for this. They were rewarded for being self-sacrificing. They were rewarded for always being a team player and giving into the bigger and solving the problem and putting out the fire. And what we have to do as adults is unlearn that behavior. Passive aggressive, conflict avoidant. Oh my gosh, that's such a big one for the families I work with. Conflict avoidant and sabotaging instead of standing up for yourself and saying what you think or what you want. And that is a hard one to teach people. And it just takes repetition. It's just over and over and over work. And this is working with the family, not with the addict. Expression of negative feelings subtly through actions instead of handling them directly. Denial, denying feelings and needs. They don't know what they're feeling and instead focus on what others are feeling because what they're feeling is too scary. Now we're digging into, early childhood trauma. and we're digging into, it's too scary for me to go into my emotions and my feelings. It's just easier for me to focus on you. This is one of my favorite statements. Hey, isn't every parent somewhat codependent? Well, yeah, probably. But then as kids get older, we have to let them go, and they got to learn on their own. So when it starts off with, right, mom and dad got to be right here, making sure that you don't touch the stove and, kill your sister and all the little kid stuff. But then as they get older, mom and dad got to back off, and they got to get into that role of being a consultant and not trying to be the manager and the director, because that's how people learn. They need more autonomy. How to address codependency? Well, here are some basics, that I believe in. Find a therapist who actually is trained in codependency. Again, there's plenty of therapists that'll tell you, oh yeah, I do codependency. I tell people, don't be afraid to just say straightforward, what's your experience? What's your training? What's your methodology? What are you using? And because it's specific and you need help in these areas. I'm a big fan of the 12-step meetings, but they're not for everybody, and that's okay. But you can also get the literature, read the literature. One of the things that every family I work with, I give them what I call the codependent starter, no more starter kit. They get Codependent No More, the workbook, and the daily book, The Language of the Heart. And we just do that. Most families I work with have done this before. It's not their first rodeo. And what they've been told is, go to Al-Anon. And I love Al-Anon, but I think it terrifies people, and they show up there and they're like, I was told to come here, and it doesn't work for them. So my position is, let's educate these families on the concepts, give them options, and make it clear. If you want to impact change on the family system, you take care of you, however way you want to do that, but that's going to be the most effective system, not focusing on the other person. Addiction affects the whole family, not just the addict. The entire family system has to change in order to not repeat the past. Like I said, you're not responsible for your loved one's addiction, but you are responsible for how you respond to it. When the addict is a teen, it's critical for both parents to agree on boundaries, accountability, and structure. By the way, I work with a lot of families that are split and blended, and we have to establish up front what the rules and regulations are going to be. Just because the addict's in treatment doesn't mean everything's okay. That's just the beginning. Intergenerational trauma, which is huge, often leads to codependency and addiction. It should be treated by a therapist with expertise. At some point, everybody is going to need trauma therapy. Yes, ma'am.
I waited till you took a breath. So Miguel has another question for you. And he says, can you speak to the importance of cultural equity and cultural competency when working with families that are struggling with addiction and codependency? Can you share any tools or resources that can help clinicians to address this challenge?
Those are great questions, Miguel. And I really hope that you'll connect with me outside of this, because I have some great resources for you on people that I know that work in different, cultural territories. Look, obviously I'm a 59-year-old, college educated white guy, so I'm that guy over here. The last thing I want to do is like, well, let me tell you how to handle this situation. It's like, dude, like, you have any idea what it's like in my family system? I'm like, you're right. I have no idea. What I have done is I have surrounded myself with people that I love and know and trust that come from different cultures and different environments and different worlds, and I rely on them. I have friends in the Latinx territory. I have lots of LGBTQ friends. I have people in the Asian world. I have people in the African American people of color and Native American. And so when I run into those territories, or I'll have someone come to me and say, hey, here's what we're dealing with. I'm like, oh, cool. Let me call my friend and get their resources, and we'll talk about how that looks and what that looks like and how that works. And I know you were probably looking for like, what book should I read? And it's like, well, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is finding the community that's in recovery in that environment, and then digging into that community. And a lot of that for me, obviously, is the fact that I'm, in the 12-step recovery environment. So I know lots of folks, and I know lots of folks in all the different communities. Did I answer?
It literally takes a village.
Yeah, it does. I mean, community is huge, but the last thing I want to do is be your typical, old white guy saying, well, let me tell you how it is, and that this is good for
Right.
everybody, because it's not, it's not. I mean, I by the way, I live in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. I moved from Colorado 4 years ago, and I grew up in California. I lived in Colorado for 25 years. And, this is the first time that I've lived in this kind of community, this kind of world, and I love it. I freaking love it. It's awesome. This is the most diverse environment I've ever lived in, and I love it. It's fantastic. And I learned so much from engaging with all the people and me like, oh, okay. So in your family system, this is how things operate. This is how we go this way. We go through the church. We go through this, we go through this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. How can I help? What can I do?
Right.
So I hope I answered your question, Miguel.
I hope he reaches out to you.
Please, I really want you to, because I actually have a lot of great friends in the Latin community that are phenomenal and do incredible work.
He says building community. He agrees. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the answer. That's just the answer. But each community builds it differently, right? So yeah. Okay. Almost done here. And by the way, I don't have anything after this, so I'm happy to stay on as long as Christy will have me. So when the family's asking, why do we have to go to meetings? Addiction affects the entire family, not just the addict. And hopefully we've proven that point at this. Therefore, the entire family needs to change in order to not repeat the past, right? We've made that clear. You can't, this is one of my favorite statements. You cannot expect the addict in the family to do something you're not willing to do yourself. That is one of the things I hit them with right off the bat. Well, if you want them to go to therapy and you want them to go to recovery and you want them to change their ways, you're going to have to do the same thing, because what's good for them is good for you. 3 keys to success: assess family dynamics. This is you as the therapist, weekly meetings, seek family support groups and resources. Establish consistency, accountability, and transparency. We talked about those earlier. Seek additional resources. Reintegration, pardon me. This is one of my favorite statements. My wife says we're going to print t-shirts, and it says on the front, it's going to say happy families come from happy individuals. Happy individuals work on their stuff. I use a different word, but for this we'll use stuff, and everyone has stuff. And on the back, we're going to put, and of course, we're going to talk about your childhood. I mean, this is where everything comes from. Continued education about codependency and addiction and trauma. Trauma. That is so critical. And every family I talk to says the same thing. It doesn't matter what their makeup is, ethnic, financial, educational, it doesn't matter. We don't have any. I'm like, okay, cool. And then we start talking about trauma and they're like, oh my God, you've just defined our entire system. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I don't argue anymore. One of the things that I find really difficult to teach families, and that's really hard because they're so used to living in crisis, is teaching them how to have fun together. And so that has to be one of the reintegration steps. Checklists for both. You'll notice they're pretty much the same thing, regular attendance in some sort of meetings, therapy, couples therapy, nutrition, exercise, meditation, relaxation, spirits. These are just my suggested tips. Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys got something out of it. Please call me, email me, text me, go on my Instagram at Kevin W. Petersen, go on the Chronic Hope Institute YouTube channel. I do a Wednesday night podcast. People can send me questions and we'll answer questions. And yeah,
that's amazing. I love it. And I will include all this information in your emails, so it'll be nice and handy. Kevin, what a great presentation. I enjoyed that and I learned a lot, and it brings a whole new aspect to looking at the family piece.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I was kind of, we have 3 dogs, and normally every time I do a presentation, one of them is going to show up and try to get my attention. I really thought one of them would come up here and make an appearance. Actually, if you
join you,
there's a painting of the 3.
There they are. Look at that. You got an artist in the family?
It was a friend of mine in Denver that actually painted it.
Nice. My son's an artist. He loves doing stuff like that. So a quick question. They're popping up. Lots of fabulous, lots of thank yous, lots of great presentations. So grateful for your time. But Leslie would like to know, are there resources for low-income families?
Yes, there are. It depends on where you live. And
Mhm.
again, contact me, let me know where you are, what you're doing, and what's going on and what we're talking about. And I can definitely direct you. One of the things about being around as long as I have been, I actually kind of, I know where the resources are, who to talk to, where to go, depending on where you live. I'll be totally blunt with you. There is literally no such thing as a traditional inpatient residential treatment center in the state of Colorado that just takes Medicaid. There's been a couple places that pop up that like, oh, we take Medicaid, and it turns out what they really don't. And it has to, the diagnosis is like,
It's a very difficult path to navigate.
yeah, it's next to impossible.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean there aren't resources. And
right.
and I'll tell you, Christy, if you haven't had my friend Alex Castro Croy do this,
I'm open.
okay, you need to have my boy Alex do this. He's the
Okay.
man. And
Okay.
he's in Denver, and he owns Life Recovery Center. It's a huge program. Anyway, I'll give you his information.
Yeah,
But
give me his information. I love it.
his cultural trauma stuff is, oh my God, head blowing. It's incredible.
Yeah. Perfect. Everybody, I'm going to give you a couple of reminders. Number one, thank you so much for joining us again this month. I'm so appreciative of your support. We love doing this. And I probably get as much out of it as you do. I learn more every last Wednesday of the month than I ever dreamed. But these emails will be coming at you by end of day on Friday. Check your junk mail. This is recorded. It will be on our website, and stay tuned for the details on our next webinar. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to me, Weeks at harmonyfoundationinc.com. Happy to help you. And Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks.